Let me start my story. I think I would like to tell you a little about how we started out and what we did and how we succeeded, where were the issues, where were the problems, and how we overcame them. So, my story really starts from a small town called Jabalpur. And as I like to mention, it doesn't matter where you come from and what you have done and what uh, education background you have. What matters is aspiration. And so I started my journey in Jabalpur. I did my schooling and college there, did my engineering, and there was a lot of impact of my family when I started. My father was a poet, and my mother had a musical background. My sisters were also into music, and my brother, elder brother, was in marketing. So, from the beginning, I've had great inclination towards poetry and music, etc. Now, when we started out in 19, I would like to before that talk about a little about just as I came out of college, uh, I was waiting to get a job. Those days, getting jobs was very, very tough. So I sort of waited and waited and waited for about 6 months. And at the end of 6 months, as luck would have it, I got three letters inviting me to come to Delhi for job interviews. And I went to Delhi, stayed with my sister, appeared for all the three interviews, and got all the three jobs. Having got all the three jobs, the big decision was which one to choose. And as luck would have it, as probably it was ordained that I chose DCM Data Products because it was an electronics company. And having come from a background of electronics and very seriously interested in sales and marketing, that job really appealed to me. So we started out in DCM, and 3 years later, six of us decided that this was not the place to be. This place was big, big company, not really deeply focused on creating this little electronics company, and the cash flows were very difficult getting money from the owners. So we decided that let's start our own business, and we decided to take the microprocessor. And that time, microprocessor was just making its appearance. Our sort of thinking was let's take the microprocessor and change the world. At that time, there were just 100 computers in India. There were like five, six large companies in India doing computers, IBM, ICL. But IBM and ICL were really bringing in refurbished products to India. And as luck would have it, they later on moved out, IBM moved out. But before that, we started with a capital of 1.86 lakhs. And we just didn't have anything else, no real resources. There was nothing called startups then. There was nothing called angels or VCs or anything. So when we started out, we were pretty much devoid of any resources. And we that time needed a license to make computers in India. So we couldn't get a license because when we went to the government, they said you're too small and we're not going to be able to do anything for you. So we started a little marketing company. The whole objective of that was to sell calculators. We bought them from companies that were making them. And in the meantime, started looking at how we would get a license. And we spotted a license sitting with UP government. We approached them and said, why can't we work together? So finally, we formed a joint sector company called Hindustan Computers Limited. And so our dream of creating and making computers in India happened. Well, later on, when I was studying in Michigan under Dr. C.K. Prahlad, my guru, he always used to say, A is greater than R. So if you have the aspirations, resources happen. And that really is the story of HCL. We had no resources. We got all the resources, got going, and created in 10 years from the start in 1976. By 1986, HCL was India's #1 IT company. Now, it just so happens that during those days, we decided that let's also step abroad. So very early days in 1980, with just 3 crores of revenue, we decided to set up a manufacturing facility in Singapore. Singapore government invited us and said, look, we don't have any electronic manufacturing facilities here. Nobody makes computers. Can you please come in and start? So we went and started there. I was pretty much man on the moon. And we started our business there. And we just couldn't get enough money to take from here because RBI just didn't allow any money to be taken really in large numbers. So what we did at that stage was that let's create our own cash flow by selling very quickly. So in 6 months, we sold $1 million worth of computers, Singapore dollars. So I think that was our start. And from Singapore, we expanded to other countries around Singapore. And Singapore itself is too small a market. So we went to Malaysia, we went to Indonesia, we went to Thailand. And then finally, we went to China. And in China, our strategy was not to sell the product that we had, but to sell system integration solutions around the Apollo workstation. So we started working with various scientific and research institutions, universities, and pretty much within the 1 year, we got our first deal, which was a United Nations deal. And that sort of got us going in China. And as we went along, we grew quite a lot in China. We got a lot of business, but it was all about salesmanship. And that's what I always have said to everyone, all entrepreneurs out there, that first thing you should do when you start a company, and if you're the CEO or founder of a company, you should be a very, very good salesperson. And if you're not, learn how to sell. Salespeople are not just born, they can be created. And in my book, I have a specific chapter on salesmanship, and I would really like all of you to read that and see how you can be successful as you start your own business or you start to grow and scale your business from where you are today. But before that, I would like to just give you some interesting examples of China and my experience in China. So one day we were negotiating a deal, and four of the customers, 4 people from the customer said, we would like to come to your room and discuss this. Now, those days, rooms were in China, you had a Russian type friendship hotel and very bare necessities in the room. But in any case, they came in, they sat with me, and we started discussing. And suddenly, one guy got up and went away. He came back. Then the second person got up and went away, came back. The third person got up and came back. And the fourth person did the same. So after the meeting was over, after about an hour and a half, they left. And I asked my colleague who was from Singapore and who knew Mandarin, I asked him, what happened? Why were they getting up and going away? So he said, look, they were going to have a shower in your bathroom. I was totally shocked because why would they want to have a shower in my bathroom? And he said, look, they just don't have bathrooms in their homes. They go to a communal bath. And those are the early days of China. So it was a very interesting experience to see people doing that. And of course, I immediately changed my room, and I didn't want to be in that room after somebody else had used my towel and soap, etc., etc. So anyway, coming to going beyond that, as we started to grow HCL, and I came back to India at that particular time, and we were pretty much the leaders in computing at that particular stage. We had the largest business around our PC, which was called the Busy Bee, and later on we created another product called Infinity. So around this, we created the whole PC business, and PC revolution really took off in a very big days, those days. And following that, we started to work on higher end computers as well. Initially, everything was designed by us, ground up. We actually sold products even which we actually had not even designed, even before they got designed. So it takes a lot of gumption to do things like that. When we started out, we had actually a product in the labs. We went to engineering institutes and research institutes and said, we are a bunch of young engineers, please support us. And without even a product, we got our first deal. So that's how we really created our initial business. So starting from creating the complete computing business, we then started to think about telecom because telecom was starting to come around at that time. I'm talking about the early 90s when people were applying for licenses to start a telecom services business like what Airtel, etc. did. And we applied for a license in Chennai. We got the license in collaboration with Singapore Telecom. Unfortunately, Singapore Telecom turned around at that time and said, "Sorry, we can't go ahead with with this particular deal because we've got too much business in China." So here we were. We had a license. We could do nothing about it. So what do you do when something that you've planned does not happen? So we at that time pivot. Think about adjacency. So what was the adjacency to a service business? It was the device business. So we decided let's go after devices. We were very familiar with hardware. So we started to talk to Motorola and we talked to Nokia. And then Motorola agreed to work with us initially. It was not a good experience. And then we brought Nokia to India. It took us 6-7 years to get Nokia going. But at the end of 6-7 years, we were able to create a huge business with devices. So we literally created the mobile telephone business because we actually created an association that would actually go to the government and get the rules changed. So we got a lot of rules changed in the government. And it made the whole ecosystem better for the phone business. And the big change we brought into India while selling phones was not to sell it with a operator, but to sell it independently through distribution. And it created from there a 8,000 crore business. And we took Nokia from 0 to 80% market share. And that was the highest market share Nokia ever had anywhere else in the world. So that's how we started the PC revolution. We started the mobile revolution. And this whole concept of creating new businesses, creating an area always gives you leadership. So if you start something, you always get the benefit of the highest market share and leadership. And I think that's really what all of you should think about, that when you want to start something and it's brand new and you see a market, you grab it. And one of the things that I always tell all entrepreneurs is that you should spot opportunities when it's a noise. And what do I mean by that? In electrical engineering, there is a concept which is called noise to signal. And noise is when it's very, very early days. So you should be able to smell a business at the noise level. And if you actually start creating a business from the noise level upwards, you will find that you will create a much, much bigger business. So we created 2-3 businesses like that. The security business when terrorism was appearing in India. And then we went on to create the system integration business. And how did we do that? We had no capability at that scale, at that stage. We had no skills. We just had hardware skills and service skills. So we took the risk of starting to look at the system integration business, which looked at hardware, networking, software, implementation, and services. And we looked at it at a very early stage, as I said, at the noise level. And what did we think about it at that time? We said, let's follow the money. So wherever money was going, we said that those are the areas where we need to do system integration. So we started looking at where was the government investing money, and we discovered telecom was big, roads was big, airports was big, highways was big, etc., etc. So we started to look at all those areas, and as I said, we followed the money. And we started to get results in about a year and a half. It doesn't happen overnight. And we started with a small little deal, and then we started to get bigger and bigger and bigger deals. Starting with a 60 crore deal, we went on to get a 500 crore deal. And when I left and sort of retired from HCL, we got our largest deal, which was to take care of Aadhaar implementation and running the Aadhaar system for the government. And that was a 2,000 crore deal. So I've been deeply involved in creating the PC revolution, the mobile telephony revolution, and the system integration revolution. Now, what did I learn from these kind of things? One of the things that I always tell startups and entrepreneurs is that if you sit on the shoulders of tall men, you can see far. So I learned a lot from people like Bill Gates. I used to meet him very often. I even went to his home. And I also met this futurologist, Ray Kurzweil, on a boat trip to Bill Gates' home. Bill Gates' home is located on a lake, and we were going across the lake to Bill Gates' home. And on the way, I happened to meet Ray Kurzweil. And he is one of those futurologists who is really trying to predict where the world will go in terms of technology. And what did he tell me at that time? He said, look, I absolutely believe that singularity will happen by 1945. And I had read that book, by the way. So when I started chatting with him, I asked him many, many questions around that. And he continued to say that singularity will happen. And what is singularity? Singularity is when the computing will overtake the brain. Now, of course, Chat GPT has appeared. So I guess it might happen even before 1945. And the second thing that he started to talk to me about at that stage was, look, I've just done some work with an MD friend of mine, and we are working on a strategy on how to live forever. So he was writing a book, and he gave me a pre-released copy of the book, which was called How to Live Forever. And I so completely surprised with this thinking. So I asked him, how do you actually make that happen? He says, the body is a chemical factory. And he took out a little bag from his pudiya, from his trouser. And he said, I eat 60 pills a day. And I make sure that my chemical balance is perfect. And every weekend, I change my blood. My God, that was just amazing thinking that I was sort of faced with from a man like Ray Kurzweil. And later on, he came to India and he talked about the whole concept of singularity and how to live forever, etc., and predicted many, many things at an India Today conclave. And all my friends there who were sitting with me couldn't understand what he was saying. So I had to explain to them what he was talking about. And later on, I had the pleasure of actually interviewing him for India Today. So those are my stories of my work life. And 2012, I took a call that I've done enough for the company. We've created a great company. Time for me to move on and do my second innings. So when I started to look at second innings, I fortunate enough to be appointed chairman of IIT Hyderabad, which was just being started in 2011. And I had also had the good fortune of having a great director, UV Desai. And we said that, look, so many IITs are there in the country. Why can't we make this IIT completely different? So one of the things that we said, and this is something that I kept telling him, said, I do not want nerds to come out of this institution. I want well-rounded people to come out. And secondly, I was very clear that IITians should not just be job seekers. They should be job creators. So I started a minor in entrepreneurship for the first time in an IIT in this country. And I started teaching there for about 7 years. I taught introduction to entrepreneurship. And I got a lot of my friends who are actual practitioners to come and teach there. And parallelly, we created 34 little subjects. And these were called fractals. And UV Desai brought in a lot of these people to come and talk and give credits for each of these courses. So people could select astronomy, people could select music, people could select literature, any of these subjects. And the whole idea was that students must know much more than just engineering. And that has been my principle from a long, long time, I always say that you need to be a rangist. You need to know more things than the single subject you know really, really well. So I taught myself many things from the beginning of my college career. I was very fond of space travel. I used to write to NASA and I would get all kinds of pictures and posters, and my whole room was full of posters of NASA. And then I had great interest, as I said, in music. And when I retired, or sort of retired, as my wife says, actually, I'm not retired. So I started to learn music, and I started to learn singing, and I practiced that every week, and I sing regularly. Now, similar other areas that I developed among in myself, and therefore I have a range of areas that I'm interested in, and that is what I would suggest that all young people of this country should think in terms of being ranges rather than being bound by a single subject. Now, as I started out IIT Hyderabad, I had an opportunity to even start uh, Triple IT Naya Raipur. We created it from scratch. And parallel to that, I started investing in startups. And till now, I must have invested in about 70 odd startups. And a lot of those startups have actually exited and given me very good returns, but I've also mentored a lot of them. So I think those are all the things that I talk about in my book called Just Aspire. And one of the big areas that I do talk about in my book is about people. How do you manage people? How do you create organizations around people? And therefore, I have called it People Tree. And I give lots and lots of examples of what kind of strategies I used to create an organization. My organization was a hardware company, very low margins. I could not pay high salaries. I needed to get people to work with me with much lower salaries than the market. And we still, for 6 years, we were named as the number one company in the country for employee satisfaction. So it's not just salary, it's how you connect with people, how you make them part of your organization. That's really what matters. For example, every new year, I would go to meet 2,000 odd people who were stationed in Noida in my facilities, factory and otherwise. And I would go and shake hands with each and every one of them and wish them Happy New Year. Of course, my arm would fall off at the end of that exercise. But literally, all of them used to look forward to meeting me every new year. And those are other things that matter when people look at how to create companies where people stay with you and work together with you. So I think that has been the experience of mine where I worked with startups, I worked with my own company, which was large. Today, from 1.86 lakhs, HCL is a 12 billion US dollar company, employing more than 300,000 people. And today, it's valued at around $40 billion. So, as I said earlier, what matters is aspiration. If you aspire, you can succeed, whether you have the resources or not. A lot of times startups come and say, I don't have this and I don't have that and I can't do this and I can't do that. I always tell them that, look, guys, if you have a great plan, if you have a very good founding team which is working together and is having skill sets which are complementary to each other. So, for example, if you have a startup and you have somebody who's a great operations person, you should have a great finance person, should have a great sales and marketing person, and you should have a great leader as a CEO. Leadership is extremely important. Without leadership, companies do not last. And leaders are not just born, they are created. You learn from others, you learn from experience, and you learn how to manage people and lead from the front. You cannot just be sitting back when there is a problem. You need to pick up the problem, solve it, and tell people, this is how it's done. So that's really what it's all about: leadership and creating people and making sure that your organization has all the capabilities. Lastly, I just want to repeat, please, if you are a CEO or a founder of a startup, get to become a very, very good salesperson. And do read about it in my book. I've written a lot about salesmanship and my experiences and what I did to become successful. Initially, you know, a lot of people say that salesmen are born. A lot of people say you have to be outgoing to be a salesman. I wasn't. I just learned salesmanship. I was taught by great people within my organization, and I had very, very good mentors who taught me how to be a good salesperson. So I think those are the kind of things that are essential to make startups successful. And now what I'm doing is that I've set up a foundation called Epic, and my objective is to make India a hardware product nation. Interestingly, in software services, some software services, it's all moved to software products. Software services margins keep going down. Software products, the margins are higher. Today, we even have $1 billion software product company called Zoho. So what used to happen earlier is no longer true. You can now become a global company with products. So my dream is that I want to make India a hardware product nation. I want to go from manufacturing to design to product capabilities and do global design and global products. And very soon, India could make this happen. Thank you.